this is the first of a couple of panels that we'll have in the assembly. Just in terms of the way that we're going to organize this, is we have 4 speakers, and we have 45 minutes, and we've had very little time for audience interaction and for questions and answers. So what we're going to do is actually very simple. So this is why we don't have any slides or audio visual. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves, their work, to take a couple of minutes to connect their work to the theme of the event. Hopefully somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes per speaker. That'll take about half of our time. I'll ask a couple of questions to sort of provoke things, but we only have one microphone, so it's going to be, to a certain extent, asynchronous. But my hope is that we can fairly quickly flip to having a conversation between the panel and the audience, because there's been very little interaction between the stage and the chairs. And so part of what I want to do is begin our transition to the afternoon. We break into teams. So I sort of challenge you to listen very carefully and think about questions and comments you might have for various people as they describe themselves, their work, and how it connects to the theme. Because we want to begin the transition now from you listening to the speakers at the front to all of us beginning to work together and comment together. So pay attention, think carefully, and then the challenge, of course, to the members of the panel is to have that nice description of their work. Take 3 to 5 minutes, or as much as you want, to introduce yourself and the work, and then we'll get going. And again, thanks everyone for the intention and the attention as we began making this transition to the afternoon part of the event. First we'll go to Daniel Boursier.
Thank you. I am Daniel Boursier from Paris. I am a researcher. I work in law and technology, but I am here especially for representing my committee of ethics. It's a committee of the CNRS. CNRS means National Center for Scientific Research. It covers all disciplines from quantum physics or nuclear physics to political science, and what we try to do is to make statements to promote research with integrity and responsibility. But when I talk about research, I think innovation is also concerned by ethics of integrity and responsibility. And I'm also the lead of Creative Commons in France. And what we try to do is to implement, to develop the spirit of sharing data, sharing works in the field of scientific publication, scientific publishing, and it's very, very hard, as you know, to promote open access, open data, and sharing data. And for me, it's different than policy, a public policy of because in Europe we have a lot of public policies about open data, but I think data sharing is a different spirit between the community, between researchers, between innovators, and we have to develop not only a top-down policy about open data, open access and so on, but we have also to develop data sharing between inside the community. It is a process totally different. It's a process of bottom-up. It's an emerging movement. It has nothing to do with the policy of the governments. Sometimes it can be facilitated, it can be integrated. But to me, to my colleagues, we try to maintain 2 ways of sharing. Open data and sharing data between researchers.
Thanks. I'm Jennifer Couch. I'm with the National Institute of Health in the United States, and that means that I give away grant money for a living. So I create opportunities for scientific research to happen in areas like systems biology and technology development, but also the reason that I'm here is I'm interested in areas like crowdsourcing and citizen science and games to do research. And I think, one of the things that struck me yesterday in one of the talks was somebody used the phrase...
Sorry, can we turn down the music? I don't know where it is.
I just talk really loud. So One of the things that struck me, one of the speakers said yesterday was thinking about moving away from quantified self and toward quantified us.
Oh, that was me.
That was you.
Hi, Jennifer. Nice to meet you. You prepared that.
All right. So I like that statement a lot because I think citizen science, crowdsourcing, to accomplish biomedical research, it isn't all just about the data that we can get. It isn't all just about you all giving us data. It's really about the sort of insights and creativity that come along with that data, and the way that people that are suffering from disease or thinking about developmental disorders or taking care of people that are aging with Alzheimer's or something like that, the insights that they have into those conditions and diseases, I think, are so equally important to the data itself. And also the creativity that people employ when they develop new hardware, new software, new ways of looking at things. And creativity comes from fields other than just sort of traditional research science fields. So I'm quite intrigued to be here and have this conversation with you all.
Hi, I'm Yael Magui. I work for the CRI that is led by François, that you already met. And Vincent, who is the coiner of Quantify Us, is also at the CRI. There's a couple of people here from the CRI. And what we do is essentially explore new ways to learn and teach. And learning is a very interesting process. My background is in neurobiology, and just take 1 minute to make the connection. I was working on the development of the nervous system, and so, if you have essentially the genome, as we heard yesterday, is 3 gigabytes, and then you want to create a full personality with everything which is working fine from the childhood to old-timer. That's a lot of information. And so obviously the program, the genome, is a very small, tiny little piece of us, and there is a lot of other stuff that is outside. And that's what yesterday was called the exposome. All the stuff that is not in the genome, but at the end of the day, you need to have it in your body to be who you are. So that's called learning, essentially. So during the entire life, you sense the outside. You take things that are interesting for you or that you have been exposed, and you need that intake, and then you make somehow sense of it so that you can decide and react. And that source of interaction all the time makes you who you are. So that process is very much focused on the connection between sensing, learning, and doing. And that connection is essentially what makes our species so special, because we have developed so many different things, and those feedback loops are extremely complex today. In this new area we are entering in with all the sensors, this goes into all kinds of different frontiers, and so now we can quantify ourselves, we can quantify us, we can quantify the environment, and all this information are like super sensors that bring us with new information that put us in a new condition, not only individually but collectively. And so at the CRI, what we are interested in is to disentangle those dimensions to see how we can help all learners, and not only the kids or the students, but also lifelong learning, to use those information, use those new technologies, those new soft technologies as collective intelligence to put together new ways to apprehend the world and build something which is different from what we have. Because as we have seen before, the intention is absolutely key in what we want to do. It's just otherwise we're just having a collection of tools and we cannot make sense out of it. To make sense of what we sense is the next frontier, and for that we need to collectively think of how we can do that.
I am Roberto Toro. I work in the neuroscience department at the Institut Pasteur, and I will give you like a more personal description of what I do. So I was thinking during the previous presentations that were very interesting. So how I got where I am. So I still remember when I was young, I spent like crazy amount of time trying to move stuff with my mind, or I forced my sister to communicate telepathically with me, and then at some point I started, I got into engineering and neuroscience, and I started to realize that in fact, I had the impression that life was already known, so that science was so advanced that we already knew everything that's right in front of the eyes, and then that the mysterious thing were, telepathy and telekinesis, etc. And then I realized that in fact we don't know why green looks green and why the time passes and stuff like that. No? And in fact, I read this sentence by Wittgenstein not long ago, so that it's in the essence of progress to look larger than it really is. So we have the impression that we know a lot, and then there's also this paper, very important recently, that says that why most of research findings are actually false. And so we live in this sort of sensation that we know, or that some scientists will know, and then when you get into science, the first thing that you realize, we don't know so little. So, and then I got into collecting data. I'm very interested in brain development and interested in autism, in particular in genetics. So I get to see a lot of data. And when we talk, as you said, when we talk about sharing data, it's like you share the data with me. Then I get to analyze that and I publish a paper, etc. If we really don't know nothing, I really have the impression that we know very, very little. And then I think that the data that we share, it has to be accessible to every one of us. It's all are sharing data with the rest of us. So I've been involved in some projects to try to get citizen science going on, in particular in neuroscience. I have one project that's about sharing data from brains from different species. I think that it gets us to see how similar we are when you compare, of course, with a chimpanzee, but also when you compare with a dolphin, for example, or even when you compare with a cat or anything, and you start to see that we are all related in some sort, even with some other species. It tells you something about how unique we actually are, and then in the same sense, you start to see how we all are also very different, as we are different from cats, and different from everyone else sitting here. And there are people which are even more different, so different that they are unable to come to a meeting like this one. So that's why I started to try, also in collaboration with François and Stephen, to try to get some, and Arnaud, of course, Arnaud in French, thinking about how to help people with autism and their families and caregivers to have access to their own data and to get, in the same way that me, I'm able to make hypotheses about what would be of help for them, that they themselves can share the ideas and test their hypotheses. A lot of what the families, when you meet them, have to face is these claims that come from the press saying that some scientists found how to diagnose autism with just one MRI scan, or that another one found that if you give this to your kids, they will become all of a sudden healthy again. And you realize then, if you are able to do some basic data analysis, that in fact they are completely underpowered in statistical terms, and then that most of those claims, if people had the tools to understand them, would just disappear and fade out. And I would make the data collected from these applications available in a way that would allow them to actually check where things are true and improved.
So you probably noticed this is a biology-heavy panel and a research-heavy panel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Danielle and with other researchers or with the public what that means in the context of knowing ourselves in the digital world. And then I'm going to ask the same question on to Gael and Roberto more and say, speaking more as individual scientists or in sort of acting in different roles, what does it mean to share data we generate ourselves or about ourselves? And so after that, I'm going to open it up to you. I have more questions for the group if you don't, but I'm hoping that you have questions for the group after we go. So we'll go back in the same order. Danielle and Jennifer talking about, sort of, from the government side, what it means to ask researchers to share data, and then Gael and Roberto to talk about what it means to share their own data.
Thank you. It is a very ambiguous question because you are. The answer, I hope, will not be ambiguous, but it's very difficult at the moment because you have the policy, as I said before, the policy of scientific policy of all the governments. I don't know if you are in Europe, It's really open your data to all the researchers. But a lot, because I make a kind of survey amongst my colleagues, and I have discovered that all the colleagues are not in the same mood with their data. For example, in physics, as we say, big science or hard science, they agree with that. It's not a problem. The CERN in Geneva, it's possible you can use all the data. But when you go to ethnography, ethnology, or political science, it's not so clear that all the researchers want to share their data. So it's actually it's the first problem. The second, because of publication, because of copyright, because of a lot of things. And the second problem is a question of privacy. Because I'm sure that you understand why privacy is especially sensitive in the field of health, the field of research, and we have to take care of that, about privacy. I know that in Europe we are very, very strict about privacy, and sometimes researchers disagree with that, because they say we are for the good, for the common good. We are scientists, we don't have another agenda, we just want to share knowledge, to make research results more accessible. But sometimes you know that we are all implied in a lot of discussion or help with other kind of aims. And the problem is we develop trust with the patient, with people who give data. And this trust, this confidence must be, it means that privacy can be a blockage when they want to share with all the medical team all their data. And the point is very important to develop this trust between researchers and patients, not only for open data, but to imply them in the result of the research. I think it must be explored as a way not to go around privacy, but to imply people, if you have interest in your data, if you give your data, and if you have interest for your illness, maybe it's enough for you to have a kind of deal with research. You understand this type of relationship, trust, but also exchange of interest between research and also passion. So I think it's very important to deal also with privacy in the field of health. And what I want also to add about data sharing and policy about open data. In data sharing, it's not the same spirit as I said before. It's because there is a commons between researchers. Implicit commons or real commons. And a lot of alliance has been made after, for example, after a colloque in Bermuda, a lot of researchers said we want to share our data. We don't care about the policy of our government or international or business secret and so on. We want to share. And when a community such as researchers decide that they want to share their data, I think they have a lot of, they are stronger than just a public policy about open data. It's what I think. So I work in France to just not to say open data is not like data sharing, but just everybody must have what's responsibility in the society. And scientists must have a special personality. They are not only citizens, they are also a member of a community who wants to share their results anyway.
So that's a nice loaded question.
Yes, that's the idea.
As funding agencies, yeah. So, and I think I can echo a lot of the sentiment that Daniel just shared about the severity speaking. About the interest in sharing data and interest in moving towards more open data, more rapid data sharing. balancing that against issues like privacy and intellectual property and all of those other struggles that we have. I think there is a disconnect in the United States as elsewhere in between the policies and the laws and things that we have around privacy and what people actually want to share when it comes to their personal health data, what they're interested in sharing, even when they recognize what the risks are. And in my country, the risks are not insignificant sometimes. But people are very interested in sharing their personal health data. So I think that we're moving in that direction. But one thing I would bring up is the difference between data sharing and making data useful, right? And I think that's a big deal. When we ask people to share data, very often that just sort of represents a big pile of data sitting on somebody's website somewhere, or buried in a journal somewhere, or sitting somewhere that no one else can find or ever access or ever use. And we get into lengthy discussions of metadata and ontologies and all of these other issues. So to me, almost a bigger issue here is sort of in the technologies and the methodologies around making data actually truly accessible and truly useful. And I think that's where a lot of our challenge will be in the future, not just sort of in the policy area of mandating ownership, which we're moving towards.
Well, of course, I absolutely agree on everything which has been said. Sharing is an interesting word, but access of the relevant data is really the key issue. From an education perspective, you can think, right now there's a lot of programs where you just teach the students the way the world is according to this and that, but they have very few hands-on solutions to experiment by themselves. So having a lot of data, especially data that are untreated, or you have databases that are just, it's a fantastic playground for a lot of activities. And so learning through research activities it's a bonanza for learning through research activities, essentially. So we are absolutely all for it. As a citizen, as a researcher, but also as an educator or someone working in this field, I think it's crucial that we have more and more open data so that we can have the kids and the students involved in developing their own view of how those data can be used. So the access is absolutely critical. And the other aspect that I just wanted to touch upon is the fact that the more that we have different data, the more we realize how people are different as well. So that's also coming back to the intention. I think it's good to have a good landscape of data, but it really depends on the way that you look at it. If it is to be normative and consider that since you're falling into that 20%, then you have a high chance of whatever. It's an interesting concept, but if you look at it and say, well, there's so many different possibilities for people to behave this way or not to behave this way, and so that should induce some respect and some empathy about the differences. And I think that's there is a whole education about what to do with the things that are coming out of the data. And I'm not sure that that's something which is really done well today.
I think that the point I would like to touch is the feedback of the data to the people. So the wide access to the data, not only the data sharing for researchers, but the data sharing for the people. Very often when I suggest, for example, that we should add some data analysis platform to the data collection that we are planning to do, we have started yet. People say that there's no way the parents that I get at the hospital will understand this data. And that got me thinking about this time where most people would just not be able to read. And I was especially facing that issue when I saw the displays in the road, and I'm just completely unable to read them. But all the kids here, they are perfectly able to read and interpret what they are seeing. So at some point in our history, I'm sure that people said, the people, the folk, they just don't have what it takes to be able to read and write. But then I went to the Wikipedia, and it seems that at some point when actually getting things printed became very easy, there was a lot of political information being spread under the control of the government, so it became important as a government to let the people to learn how to read and write so that they would be able to get the information that we wanted them to see. And I think that may be exactly the issue now when a patient comes to see a doctor. Look, here's my CD. I have this need, this in these genes, I have a susceptibility for all this, so what do you think? No, I read in PubMed or I went to the Wikipedia, etc., and I have, what's your take? And very likely the doctors is the first time that I hear about that gene, etc. So at some point we will have to accept that, probably in the same way that we thought that literacy was important. Data literacy will also be important, and people, I think that everyone of us is perfectly able to understand what a t-test is, or to check if a correlation is really true or not. And so the data sharing, not only for the researchers, but also with the people, with means of making it useful also for the people, and not only for researchers. So the worst that could happen is what you said, data sitting somewhere, audiences who will look at it.
Keep the microphone open. I'm going to ask one more question and bring it back this way, because I'm not going to make Danielle answer first. That's not fair.
Is the public allowed to ask them?
Yeah, I just want to ask him one more question.
This is open innovation.
Yeah. I'm going to ask him one more question. I'm going to ask him one more question. But to your point on data literacy, and the first point in your first statement about how underpowered studies are not reproducible and people draw bad conclusions, right? So you're very positive at this assembly about knowing thyself in the digital world. So let's talk about some of the risks as we go through this transition of knowing ourselves when the machine learning is pulling out correlations, as Emmanuel pointed out, that might not be causative, right, when we have underpowered studies. So let's talk a little bit about some of the downside and how we get through that. How do we cope with that?
Yeah. So it could become very easy to just find thousands of spurious correlations. Many people know, and it's not very difficult, how to compute statistical power, or just what are the chances of observing correlations by random. And at the CRI, we have been playing with this game where you just study statistical power with figures cut out of paper. It's finally a relatively intuitive concept. And I think that more than trying to hide the complexity from people, we should just give them tools that we use every day to assess the presence of correlations in just whatever data set you have. So I think that the worst idea would be to hide the complexity, just because people will not be able, as I have, to understand.
So hands up, please. I'm going to make a list. So I've got Paul, Kelsey, Bruce, Daniel, Susan. All right, we're going to go from left to right, and we're going to have the people who have not spoken are going to speak first. Are going to ask questions first. So Paul.
So two things. One, can people hear me if I speak this loud?
Yeah.
Awesome. Loud. So two things. The first is just actually on the exact last question. I worry a lot about whether or not we have the statistical understanding to correctly draw interpretations. So I'm a computational biologist, and when I see my colleagues and I give them a large table of data, the first thing that will happen is go through, look for your first gene that's of interest, and say, oh, that one is the interesting one, that wasn't interesting. And they implicitly make all sorts of mistakes with multiple testing and lack of power, and this leads to huge waste in experimental work. And these are from scientists who have had statistical training, and I agree with the principle, but I think we have to really radically transform the way we think about statistical training and bring it not as an undergraduate course, but as you say, something very intuitive that should happen much earlier in the educational process, so that these kinds of mistakes stop happening because people didn't see statistics for much of their life. The second point I'd make is that I think if we ask ourselves what have been the big barriers to sharing data, there are three. There's legal barriers of some shape, be they people are explicitly worried about legality or implicitly because of things like health insurance. There's some sort of incentivization where a scientist is going to say, should I share the data? That might preclude me from getting credit on a paper somehow. And then there's the effort that is required in fully sharing the data and making it usable. I'd be curious for thoughts from the panel of which of those three do you think is really the ones that are driving the lack of fully open data? What do you think is the one that we should be most addressing?
You're
is
falling
it legal,
into the exact same
incentivization, or effort?
You're falling into the same pit that you're accusing your investigators of. You're looking for the one best gene that is most exemplary of this, the problem, when in fact it's a network analysis and it's a connectivity that is really the most important thing to understand. So instead of addressing just the single factor, how do they interact and how do you facilitate their interactions in the most positive way?
That's a fair point. I don't immediately see the interactions between the legal and the effort. I think that to some extent those are separable, but maybe they're not, and maybe you're exactly on the right lines that we should think about what are the weaknesses in that network that we should go for.
Anyone want to answer, to take this one?
Currently in France, I'm sorry, to talk about that, but we are discussing with a public consultation a law on digital republic. So it's the title of this new law. I think it will be voted within the next month. And one article of this law is administration mustn't only give data, they must give analytics, algorithm to understand the data. And it has been a very strong demand of people, not only to have data. I don't know if it is an answer to your question, but I think it's important because data, if you don't have the software, you don't have all the way to use data to understand, not you, but maybe a colleague or research staff or so on. So I think it's important that now the effort is not only to open data, but to give way to the citizen to understand algorithmics. It means the rules which will apply data. You understand? I think it's a step toward a better knowledge of what is the data.
So I'm going to actually go back to your first comment about sort of statistical power and data mining and all of that. So I think in a way, when we think about just collecting up masses of data and making it available and having people mine it and finding interesting stuff, and you're right, sort of pattern finding algorithms will find patterns, people will find correlations, and what does that mean? So I think a lot of it comes down to the way that we ask the questions of the data and how we work together to do that. So I think a lot of this is about partnerships, creative partnerships and collaborations, and people working together to ask the right questions of the data rather than just kind of using whatever algorithms we might have to sort of pull out patterns that may or may not mean anything, which is why I'm a big believer in citizen science and crowdsourcing. I think that the public, patients, caregivers, whatnot, have these kinds of insights into what that data actually means. Working together with researchers, with mathematicians, with computer scientists, we can maybe ask better questions of the data.
I think that there's also a technological issue which prevents people from sharing data. So a lot of the data, well, very often I see data in the lab that's in someone's hard disk drive, portable hard disk drive, or sitting in a file organization that no one knows. So when the person leaves the lab, there's no more access to the data. And so there is, of course, the legal issue. There is, of course, the reputation thing. But the data, by default, it takes a lot of effort to make it available. So even if there were not legal issues, even if I didn't worry about the publication, etc., it would still require a lot of technical infrastructure that, in particular, so I work in biology. In particular, in biology, it's just not available. So when we present a grant application, if you propose like 5% or 10% of the grant money to go to the informatics infrastructure, it will be refused. People don't see that as being worth of investment. And so by default, the information is technically unavailable. And over that, you have to add everything that you can inside.
I greatly appreciate all your comments, and I took exception a little bit, Jennifer, in your bashing of the role of metadata. And to me, as a data wrangler,
Wasn't meaning to bash metadata.
just the ability to mine using ontological frameworks that you can only work through metadata relationships is paramount. So that what do you having this pile of data, I completely agree with you. It's not that. It's beyond that. Where not only do you put it into a mine form, which is where you can find the golden nuggets that according to your interests, and enabling a data mining structure that is addressable from many different interest types. So how do we set up data mines in ways that are any people from neurodevelopmental or neurodegenerative or pharmacologists, anybody that is working in a given system can get access to data in these useful ways, and then go beyond that, make a model, persist that model, share it with people, and so I think getting results, interpretation, model-driven knowledge generation, and then persisting that, sharing it, is I think something that is missing in a lot of our data sharing plans in our current systems. So I completely agree with you on that. Is that make it useful, show how it's useful, teach people how to make use out of it, and teach, like Paul was saying, teach investigators to think in network-based ways rather than just sort of the most causal factor in this, which is great, but sometimes you can only do that in the context of the network. And then beyond that is this hacking biology, hacking health. So we need to understand perturbations. So we know about environmental risks and genetic risks and other sorts of the way we live our life as factors that kind of impinge on our outputs and dysfunctions and diseases. But what can we do that changes things? And so we need this perturbome-based data mine where we can see what's the effects of try this, try that, and how does that change the relative function of given biology? Can we learn? Now can we enable learning in a learning compromised environment, an individual, and genetic situation as a function of perturbation X, Y, or Z? So those are data types that we don't really have access to, and I think doing large-scale communal correlations is not. It's going to set us up for doing that, but it may not. Hacking health and hacking disease we're going to need other things where we can do. Clinical trials on the fly. So if you have a patient's like me environment, you have sort of shared, you're participating in data set, you're pushing your data into this mine now and say, hey, can we set up a clinical trial on the fly and then see, do outcomes out of that in a controlled population. We have a lot of other data that can support it. This is something that NIH or CNRS funded investigation could ever do. It's only this is the potential, I think, in the larger sphere.
Influence the crowd versus the community coming first to help influence policy, and I'd be interested to hear your guys' comments on which of those you guys find more effective, the stick or the carrot.
I want to take it first. Gael, do you want to go? Anyone? Sorry.
Yes, sticks and carrots are both useful, I think, right? And I think having watched this kind of thing evolve over many, many years of doing science, it's always about neither the kick nor the stick. Need the rest of mine. The coffee break is a little too late for me. So the stick and the carrot have to come together, I think. Sort of, we can't make policy without the community really buying in and being sort of driving that policy. And policy is sort of a broad thing, not just sort of government policy, but journal policies and all of those things that come along with it, right? So it's sort of the evolution of the community thing with the evolution of the policy, always going hand in hand in kind of an iterative fashion, I think that works the best.
I have to just briefly step in and disagree. and I think this is very important. What you just heard was a funder who said we can't go before our community goes, okay? And what happens when that happens is no change. So the real data sharing, the real getting data out there allows the NIH and other places to hide behind our community isn't ready for this, okay? This will not happen until funders are saying, you will not get this data unless you do this. Okay? It's not going to be the publishers. Okay? It's not others. Many people are ready to share information, and much more importantly than data, insights. That will not happen until funders become leaders. Okay? Instead of saying, my community cannot allow that to go forward. I'm sorry.
I agree. You have too many PIs that are on council that are supporting the R01 guys who want to protect their data forever.
Okay, we got to keep moving. I don't want to cut off.
You guys can all attack me on the lunch break.
Good setup, though. You set it up.
Till now, I heard the air-conditioned level, kind of. But there's also grassroots level. In research, especially in search, the world is much more a jungle, like as we call it, a la Tolstoy in Holland. In Holland, we have 4 kinds of research. Here, people talk about white research, but we have also grey research and black research and forbidden research. What we now call the compact disc was developed in an industrial laboratory by people who were not allowed by their bosses to do it. So they made a special room in the nat lab, the natuurkundig laboratorium, with a door on it, with a skull, forbidden to enter, to do what they wanted to do. And of course they were not fired when they came with their results. The second point is, there is also such a thing as what is called in English language, the personal research. When you do a paid research, and you find a flower the side of the road, as we say in Holland, and you kneel down to find out what you did find. We call that a Friday night or a Friday afternoon experiment. That is personal research. And when you find something, you are not going to share your result. You ask money to discover what you have already found, but did not get published. In communistic countries, they did the same with 5-year plans. Because such proposals, such 5-year plans are more easy to write. In China, many people do the same, I realize now. And why not one word is said about this? Because in ophthalmology, we have air-conditioned level, Geneva, and grassroots level. In research, especially search, it is exactly the same. Is that clear? And somebody who is doing grey or black or forbidden research, he will never share his data, even not to his colleagues, because maybe he will be verraten. I'm not meddling. In Holland we agree on this. And we should tolerate those 4 traditions of research, and especially the diffusion between. Like in economy, you have formal and informal economy. And people, they work black and grey and white, and they move between those 3 sectors.
You can give it to Susan, the mic.
I'm very emotional about this.
Hi.
I'm a diffusionist.
I applaud the effort to share data that's been funded with public tax money. It should be made public. But what I want to know is, why aren't there library scientists here on this panel talking about open data? You need them to make this happen.
We've got Daniel in the back.
Who spoke earlier?
I'm looking at Lockheed medicine, doesn't count?
Well, what you need are ways to, you have all this data that you're gathering, but you need to be able to retain the context of that data to make sure that people can navigate through these cathedrals of huge amounts of data. So you need these specialists who can create a system whereby, maybe a new Dewey Decimal System or something, where you can find the subject matter that you want and connect it over to other subject matters and have it meaningful. And at the very start, you're going to need people to walk you through that process. You're going to need somebody to...
Unfortunately, none of the librarians we invited except for Daniel.
My apologies.
Yes. All right, so we're at noon.